we do solemnly swear or affirm that we will faithfully execute the office of podcast hosting and will do our best to our abilities to preserve, protect, and defend everything you have come to expect of the show that is Convince Me. Welcome in, everybody. It is episode 40. Episode 40 of the Convince Me Show. I am Andy Rutherford, joined as always by Mr. Brian Bennett and Mr. Casey Elrod. Gentlemen, how goes it?
How many times you practice that?
0.
It's impressive. I never give you props, but that was impressive.
I've got it pulled up on my phone.
Not
like I memorized it.
The truth comes out.
That's why I would never be a good politician, because I'm honest. But anyway, Bennett, how are you?
Doing well, sir. I'm doing well. How goes it today?
It's kind of sucks. A little under the weather, but that's not gonna, unlike Elrod, I will not skip a podcast because I don't feel well. So here we are for episode 40 of Convince Me. Don't feel bad for me though, folks. It's just a little sinus issue. I don't have the COVID. I know this for a fact. I got my brain stabbed yesterday. They said I was good. So just a really bad sinus system, but I'm here for you guys. We are here for you guys, just like we are every single week. This week we're here on time again, which is a positive. And we will start off as always with our weekly shield. Make sure you guys are following us on all of the socials. Bennett's graphic is back. You can find us. Our most active page is over at facebook.com/Convince Me Show. Every Tuesday night over there, you're going to get a preview of every week's show in video format. So be sure you're following us over there. You can also find us on Twitter at Convince Me Show. Occasionally, we let you guys pick the show topics. We'll put those in poll form, and those polls can be found over on Twitter. You can also find us on Instagram. Check out Bennett's fantastic artwork that he does for this show. We're Convince Me Show there on Instagram. And then, as always, every episode, every week in full video format can be found on our YouTube page, tinyurl.com/Convince Me Show. And of course, the show drops every Wednesday wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts and us. And if we're not where you listen to your favorite podcast, let us know and we will do our best to get there. So now that is out of the way, gentlemen, it's a big week in our country, and we have one rule on this show. We don't go political, but tonight we're going political without going political. There's a lot of talk in the world right now that there's an old president that's out, there's a new president that's in, president this, president that, love this president, hate that president. We're not getting into any of that. But what we're getting into tonight is some of our favorite presidents that we've seen that have not actually served. Tonight we are debating who is the best president from TV or film. It is a who is the best fictional president debate. Myself will be arguing for Mr. Francis Underwood, House of Cards. Bennett will be representing the great Bill Pullman's character on Independence Day. And there's a lot of guys we left off this list. Morgan Freeman could be in this debate. Harrison Ford could be in this debate. But we picked these two. Deal with it. Elrod, you told us before the show this might be a little tricky one for you to mediate for us.
I know it. I mean, this is like choosing between your children. Which one do you like better? Some people might. Most people don't. My second all-time favorite movie is Independence Day, and my favorite all-time television show is House of Cards. So this one's tugging at the heartstrings. as you might say. It's tugging.
All right.
Is your favorite movie Forrest Gump?
Third. Twister's number one. We got to have a debate about Twister on. That's for a later show. So, I thought about this. In order to determine who goes first tonight, we're going to have a Kevin Spacey themed question. Now, he's been in the news over the last year for some transgressions that he had, but we're going to talk about, or the question's going to feature him at the box office. Kevin Spacey has been listed as a supporting actor the majority of his career rather than a lead man. He's been credited with 11 movies where he was a primary supporting actor. So if you got a pen and paper, get it. Because my question is, closest to the number, what is Kevin Spacey's worldwide box office total for his roles in a supporting role? What is that number for over 11 movies? It's a big number, but it's not as high as you think. Maybe I think I just led y'all astray. Just put a number down.
Ready.
11 movies. All right. Let's see what you got. We got 337 million and 188 million. Yeah, I did lead y'all astray because this number is right at 1.7 billion. So I did lead y'all astray a little bit. It's an actual number is 1,610,076,940. So Bennett, you are the closest. Would you want to go first or second tonight?
My question is, before I answer that, how is 1 billion a small number?
Well, if you're comparing this movie to Marvel movies, maybe that's what I should have said.
You don't know anything about Marvel movies. You proved that on the show.
Let's not talk about that. That brings back bad memories. Bad memories. First or second, Bennett?
I'll go first.
All right.
I'll kick us off here.
So, Bennett, tell me why President Thomas J. Whitmore is superior to Francis Underwood.
You know, when you think of the word president and you try to describe in one word the definition of president, I would think of a leader. Webster's dictionary says it's a powerful person who controls or influences what other people do, a person who leads a group, organization, country, etc. But they could have saved some time and just condensed that down to say Thomas J. Whitmore. Or Whitworth, maybe, but Whitmore. But under his command, he saved not only our great nation, but also all of humanity against a force of evil, the likes of which that mankind had never really seen before. In what looked like certain doom for Earth, he delivers a memorable speech that rivals, or you could say exceeded, the Gettysburg Address. And if that wasn't enough to propel him to the number one spot for a fictional president debate, he and his team devise and execute a plan to save the world from a highly advanced alien life form. You want to talk about ultimate hero. That's the guy that I want leading my country. And I believe that he is the greatest fictional president ever. And tonight I'm going to lay out some evidence that shows why Thomas J. Whitmore is a worthy candidate for the title.
All right. So, Rutt, if Thomas J. Whitmore is a hero, your client, Francis J. Underwood from the great city of Gaffney, you're probably going to go the opposite way with Mr. Underwood, or maybe you don't.
Here's my thing. What do we like best about movies and television shows? We like relatability. We like the storytelling, but a lot of times those that really connect with people are the things that are believable, that people can see themselves in. Now, if we were ever under attack by aliens, sure, I would like a Thomas J. Whitmore to lead this country and I dare say the world in that situation. But here's the thing. You want to talk about leader, you want to talk about, just stand up, rally the troops, somebody everybody loves. That's great. That's fantastic. That's not realistic. That's fairy tales. That's rainbows. That's lollipops. That's the movies. But if you want a real life look of what a president probably really is like, what life in Washington probably really is like, and somebody that does it better than anybody else, well, that is Francis J. Underwood. Frank Underwood, president of these United States, 46th president of these United States, judging by the show. Son of a peach farmer from Gaffney, South Carolina. He exemplifies what Washington probably actually is like today and really shows you what it is and really gives you that inside look to what life is like on Capitol Hill. And he does it with his maneuvering and his scheming and his plotting better than anybody else. That's how he went from a state senator of South Carolina all the way up to the presidency without ever being elected, because he did it better than anybody else. That's why Francis J. Frank Underwood is the best fictional president.
Bonus points for the accent. A little Jimmy Carter in there, a little bit of Georgia in there.
See,
but that's close.
my South Carolina sounds like my Georgia. And for those of you that might be listening that aren't from the South, it's not all the same dialect. When you cross state lines in any direction from where we are, this, what I'm speaking to you in, is sinusy, nasally Tennessean. But when we go to the east to North Carolina, it sounds different. When we go south to Georgia, it sounds different. When we go west to Arkansas, it sounds different. So yeah, my South Carolina, my Georgia are similar, but they're similar. They share a border there. So
They do.
So
one could,
what?
You could argue that there's several dialects just here in Tennessee.
That's true.
The Middle Tennessee dialect, the Eastern Tennessee dialect.
Go Vols. So
right, I want to keep it with you. Tell me about, you kind of mentioned this in your opening, but tell me about how Francis J. Underwood ascended to D.C. and eventually the presidency.
Well, right, I will tell you that, and I will tell you that right after we take this break. If you're with us on Facebook, this is where it ends from you. Come hear us talk about more Southern dialects. Probably not, but more about Thomas J. Whitmore, Francis Underwood. Make sure you're tuning in to the podcast, to YouTube, to find those things out. If you're with us right now on the podcast or on YouTube, we will be right back. And we are back. Mr. Elrod, if you don't mind, repeat your question that you just asked me.
I will. Right, we'll keep it with you. Tell me about Francis J. Underwood's ascension from the South Carolina state government and how he got to the White House.
Sure. Give me just a second to get back here in my notes. If I was, well into things, I would have done this before we even got there. But I'm going to start with this. Francis J. Underwood, born in Gaffney, South Carolina, to a peach farmer there. Graduated high school and went to the Sentinel in South Carolina, which is a military school. Basically, it's the Citadel, except they couldn't call it the Citadel, so they called it the Sentinel. Supposedly, there's some looking into it that he didn't have great grades there while he was at the Sentinel, but somehow, even without great grades, because this is a fictional world, he still got into Harvard Law. Went to Harvard Law, graduated from Harvard Law School, got his JD there, and then came back home to Gaffney and he didn't practice law. He went straight into politics. He started off on the South Carolina State Senate, where he was elected at age 25 to the state legislature there in South Carolina, and then served 2 terms there, and then decided to run for the House of Representatives as a representative of the 5th Congressional District of South Carolina, where at the age of 29, he was elected there. And he went on to win 11 consecutive elections there as the House representative. He eventually was elected whip for the Democratic Party, where he served from 2005 till 2013. And then, as we know, there's a new president coming in. He was promised Secretary of State, and then he kind of got that taken out from under him, and he didn't get Secretary of State. And since I'm limited on time and I don't want to give a lot of spoilers, he went above and beyond to get a man who to run for president of Pennsylvania. And then that man died of an apparent suicide. Mm-hmm. And he convinced the then vice president-elect to step down as vice president to go run for governor of Pennsylvania, since with the death of Mr. Russo, that was wide open. So that man steps down to run for governor of Pennsylvania, and lo and behold, Mr. Underwood doesn't become Secretary of State. He becomes the vice president of the United States. And then, as things would happen, mysteriously, the current president comes under fire, looking at a impending impeachment, and steps down. And when he steps down, of course, we know in the United States, if a president steps down, vice president becomes president of the United States. And that is how Francis J. Underwood became president of these United States of America.
You know, in the very first episode of House of Cards, Frank Underwood's at the party for President-elect Walker. He talks about how Walker got 60-something% of the vote. I don't think we're ever going to see that again in this country. One guy gets 60-something% of the vote. All right. I will go with you, Bennett. Tell me about Thomas J. Whitmore's ascension to the White House. You probably don't have as much source information like we do for Francis Underwood, do we?
Yeah, I was about to say I'm going to go a whole lot shorter than what Rutt went there. But what we do know is that he was a war hero. He was an F-16 fighter pilot in the United States Air Force, and he was a Gulf War veteran. And after he completed his service, he kind of took an interest in politics. And speaking of politics, he was an accomplished politician after his time in the military. He was a local boy. He was elected to Tennessee's 2nd Congressional District, and that's a position that he would hold for 2 terms. And he eventually was elected 42nd president. That would be 1992. And he began his first term in January of '93, and mainly he got this because of his war experience, and as well as his youth. He gave a lot of people hope because of his youth that he had, and he served as president until 2001. We also know that he was widowed. His wife Marilyn Whitmore was deceased during the war that we'll get into a little bit later on. And he also had one daughter named Patricia. And lastly, the other thing that we know about him is that he was a major advocate for the Earth Space Defense Initiative, which basically, if you're not aware, it's an international program that serves as Earth's early warning system and United Global Defense Force against future extraterrestrial threats. And that's what we know about Mr. Whitmore.
You know, as I said earlier, this movie is my 2nd favorite movie of all time. I did not know that Thomas J. Whitmore was from Tennessee. Did not know that. So, already learning stuff on this show. How about that?
There we go.
The more you know. All right, but tell me about some of the strengths that Mr. Whitmore had while he was president. Probably going to talk about his war record and his leadership.
One of the strengths that we know is for sure he was a superb pilot, both before and during his presidency. Before which he was, like I said, a F-16 fighter pilot in the Gulf War, and I'll get into this a little bit later on. But even during his presidency, he was also a very skilled pilot. He also has extensive combat experience, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the pilot skills I just talked about that he had during his time in the Air Force. Another thing that's one of his strengths would be he's an excellent public speaker. The speech that he delivers has right before mankind wages war on the extraterrestrials, aliens, whatever you want to call them. That speech that he gives rivals that of William Wallace in Braveheart. It's that good of a speech.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing, his leadership abilities in a time of crisis. You know, they always say war is hell. It's full of tension, uncertainty, and fear. And Earth had never really seen an enemy like this before. There was a lot of uncertainty and fear and tension, but under his leadership, he led humanity through unprecedented times. He volunteers to lead a group of jet fighters in an airstrike attack on the mothership, which results in them defeating the aliens and their spacecrafts. And another one is, this is where it gets kind of out there. It's kind of fictional. Is his ability to telepathically see the intentions of the aliens. Give a little bit of backstory behind this. When they were at Area 51, he came face to face with this alien that's being held captive here at Area 51, and he attempts to make peace with the alien, but he was rejected. The alien wasn't having none of it. He then demanded to know, what they want from Earth. What do you want from our people? And the alien kind of launches this psychic attack against him. And as kind of a side effect from this, he's able to see the creatures kind of inside his brain and kind of pick it and learn that the aliens were kind of like locusts. You know, they come, they attack a planet, they consume it of its natural resources and annihilate everything, and then they move on. So had this not happened and he not been able to see what was coming down the pipe, there may have been a very different outcome for Earth had he not seen this. So that's just a few of the strengths of President Whitmore there.
Yeah, one of the scenes that I remember is they're in the Area 51, and he's connected with the alien, and he says, "What is it you have us to do?" And the alien just looks at him and goes, "Da, da." It's creepy.
A little scary.
It is scary. Very scary. Right? Tell me about some of Francis J. Underwood's strengths as president of the United States.
Well, I think one of the big strengths that he has is something we don't see much in the presidency anymore that used to kind of be a big thing in this country, but it's that charm when he talks to people. It's that Southern charm, just the son of a peach farmer from Gaffney, South Carolina. You know, he has that approachability in his voice. Now, that might not always be true, but it seems that way in the way he speaks to people and the way he is out and about with his constituents, which gives him a relatability factor to those constituents, that charm, that Jimmy Carter-like charm that he has. And I think another strength that he has is you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. Now, his wife, Claire Underwood, they didn't always see eye to eye. They wouldn't necessarily be what you would think of when you think of a husband and wife. It was really more of a business partner type relationship, political. But of course, she's a strong female presence who, when she's in his corner, seems to be when things are going the best. Of course, his wife played by fantastic actress by the name of Robin Wright. Bennett, what else would I have seen Robin Wright in?
Let's say not the Ninja Turtles.
Not the Ninja Turtles.
Your favorite movie?
Your favorite movie?
I know. I don't want to give him the satisfaction.
Well, she looks an awful lot like what Jenny, if Jenny hadn't grown up in Greenbow, Alabama and experienced the 60s and had grown up to marry a representative from South Carolina, that's what she would look like. But he's got Doug Stamper, who is his right-hand man. And if we all had someone as loyal and as willing to do our bidding as Doug Stamper, we would all be living a much better life now. That's all we could ever ask for, is a friend that loyal as Doug Stamper was. So he surrounded himself with good people. And honestly, he had a strength that most great politicians have today, and that is the almighty spin. To be able to spin a story, to be able to spin something to the way you want it to go. He honed this skill as the majority whip of the House. He was able to get both Republicans and Democrats alike to vote how he wanted them to vote, to make something seem not as it actually seemed, but what he wanted you to think was actually going on. He was very good at having you see his side of things. Granted, there were probably dire consequences for you if you didn't, but he was very good at having you see his side of things when it came to that. And just the charm, the right people around him. He knew how to get things done, and he did. Literally by hook or by crook.
Yeah. Mostly by crook.
Fair.
Well, you kind of hit on that, right? Of course, he had some strengths, but Francis Underwood had some weaknesses too. I don't think we can shy away from that. So tell me Underwood's weaknesses.
Well, he had some personal vices. Are you talking about his love of playing video games and secretly smoking cigarettes? Because he fought those things. Those were his personal vices that he used to get away. But once he became vice president, they kind of shut down his video game playing, which he was not happy about. But Frank Underwood has often been described with words like conniving, Machiavellian, sociopathic, a symbol of political corruption. When you look at things like that to describe someone, I guess you could probably say those were a weakness, although he used them to build up quite a bit of power and strength. So I guess it's just however you interpret that. Throughout the show of House of Cards, he manipulates and destroys people, friend or foe, if it needed to be done. You know, he did some things that we probably would not want a president to do. Committing murder, having people murdered, those sorts of things, blackballing people, blackmailing people, critically injuring a member of his cabinet to prevent her from testifying against him. Those sorts of things are probably something that some people might pull up as a weakness, but his personal weaknesses and his vices were video games and cigarettes. He had a hard time getting away from those.
Most series, especially on Netflix, tries to start out with a bang, like Ozark. That first, who can forget the first episode of season 1 of Ozark? All the crap that happens in that first episode. Do you remember, right, the very first episode of House of Cards? The very first scene at what happens.
Yes, that almost made me stop watching the entire series immediately. Yes,
he kills a dog. The dog gets hit, or I think he was hit by a car outside his house. And he kills the dog with his bare hands. He breaks his neck. And you can hear the dog. And it's like, holy crap. If this is how this is going to start off, this is pretty crazy. So,
here, personal thing of mine. I don't do movies. I don't do TV shows. I don't do anything where there's harming of dogs. I'm not a huge PETA animal rights person, but I do love dogs. And I don't like movies that put dogs in bad positions. And Mr. Elrod and another friend of the show told me don't stop watching after the first scene because they know how I am, and I almost stopped watching after the first scene. Had I not been given that heads up, I may never finish the show.
And then House of Cards features a lot of sides. Later on, Clara does these in her season, but he talks about how pointless suffering. That's his first soliloquy to the audience, where he talks about pointless suffering. So, Bennett, now talk about that. Give me some weaknesses for President Whitmore.
Yeah, there was two glaring weaknesses that I found about President Whitmore. The first one would be the politics in the early part of his presidential career. Kind of during his first years in the office, he tried to introduce, these major legislative initiatives, to reform all this stuff from the legal system to the healthcare to the environment, all this stuff that he wanted to do, and kind of against the advice of some of his staff, team advisors, whatever you want to say. He spent most of his time and energy trying to get these bills passed, and that kind of got him bogged down, really, and kind of forced him to kind of make some favors with some policymakers to kind of get his policies achieved. And as a result, the public just hated him. They openly attacked him for his meek outlook and his inexperience in the politics. And, that prestige and that popularity that he had when he was voted in as president back in 92, 93, that was out the door. That plummeted. So it wasn't looking too good for him with the approval rating of the public. Number two was how greatly he underestimated the aliens at first. When attempting to establish communication with the CD destroyer that was kind of overwatching in there, he was warned, that these aliens have come here with bad intentions. They're not trying to be friendly, and he didn't really listen to them. But those warnings that he got was definitely confirmed when the CD destroyer pretty much, blew up and vaporized all these landmark buildings and stuff. And then he immediately issued a large-scale evacuation to these targeted cities. But it was too late for all that. People were scampering. It was already too late. They started destroying all these cities. Killing millions of people. And him and his daughter narrowly escaped, as they get on Air Force One there as everything's going awry. The aftermath of all this greatly affected Whitmore. And he really came to, lament his indecision to prepare the people for the hostility of these aliens, So the underestimating and the kind of the shortcomings he had in his political career at the first were like two huge weaknesses that I saw.
And you see, he's a weak leader when it starts off when aliens arrive. He says, "Well, I think we need to go down to DEFCON, whatever." And his defense secretary says, "No, we're doing this." Basically, whatever he said wasn't going to matter. His secretary of defense tried to basically call the shots because he was kind of a weak leader at that point.
I'll tell you one thing too about whenever everything starts getting blown. When you watch it back, like in '96, I'm 9 or 10 years old, and these buildings get blown up, and I think the White House gets vaporized, whatever. And back then, you're like, whoa, it's a big explosion. But now, when you're much older, that hits a whole lot different now than it did back then. It's very, very weird to watch. These alien crafts just blowing up all these landmarks, not just in America too. If you think about it, it's a very bizarre movie to go back and watch when you're much older now.
Bennett, I'll keep this with you. Tell me, President Whitmore, is he a believable character to be a president of the United States in real life? Is it believable?
the first thing you think of is, the alien attack. And of course, that's kind of hard to wrap your head around because that hasn't never happened. If you're a believer of aliens or if you're not, maybe that's a possibility one day, but it hasn't happened. So it's kind of hard for people to wrap their minds around that as being a possibility. But there was a couple of things that I got out of the movie that would definitely make him, to me, a believable character. Number one was his military experience. We know from the movie that he was an F-16 fighter pilot in the Gulf War, and he has that military background. Well, he's in good company because there have been 26 presidents that have served in the military. Some of the greatest presidents of all time have a military background. So for Whitmore to pursue a political career after serving in the Air Force does seem pretty normal, just following the footsteps of some other great presidents we had. Number two, that makes him a very real, believable character is the struggles that he had in the office. He introduced the initiatives to reform a slew of things in the legal healthcare system, but didn't get a whole lot of support, and the public becomes really displeased by him, like I said just a minute ago, and his weaknesses. We know from the movie that his approval rating drops below 40%. His assistant's like, "Oh, your approval ratings drop below 40%." But when you think of that, about dropping below 40%, 11 of the past 14 presidents have had their approval ratings drop below 40% at some point during their presidency. His 40% approval rating just shows that, like all the other presidents dating all the way back to 1937, in the eyes of the public, he's not perfect. There's times that people are going to approve what he does, and there's times that he does stuff that people aren't going to approve what he does. So to me, that makes him very believable character.
Yeah. All righty. Right. This is probably going to be an easier question for you because Frank Underwood possesses a lot of qualities a lot of people in Washington have, and a lot of our former presidents have had. So tell me, is Frank Underwood a believable character in your opinion?
If the last decade or so of politics in this country, especially in the social media age where we see a lot of things and hear a lot of things that we didn't used to see and hear before. If the last decade of that has shown us anything, it is that Frank Underwood is the most believable president of anybody in any movie, any TV show, maybe even real life. He is the most believable person with the backdoor scheming, the backdoor deals, the threats, the blackmailing to get his way, the threats of violence, the instances of violence. If anything, the last few years has shown us with the way a lot of politicians are on both sides of the aisle and the extents they will go to get their way. If that has shown us anything, it has shown us that Francis J. Underwood is the most believable presidential character ever in history of TV or film.
I think that's, what hurt House of Cards other than Kevin Spacey's transgressions? Real life. Real life, the past year has been stranger than the last couple of seasons of House of Cards.
Yeah.
That's crazy, but it's also very true. So we're going to finish up, right? We'll stay here with you. You just talked about how he's got some believable characteristics, but tell me, what actual president that we have had can you compare Frank Underwood to? Is there anybody that you can compare him to?
When I think about this question, I look at several things. I look at our current president, and I'm not going to go there because we're not going to talk politics. I'm not going to alienate part of our fan base, good or bad. not going there. But when you look back at, the way he presents himself to his constituents, that charm I talked about earlier might make you think of a Jimmy Carter or a Bill Clinton, that Southern charm that people just like. And then you think of Bill Clinton and you think of Bill Clinton's transgressions and the things, and you might think of that, but Bill Clinton's transgressions didn't seem very politically motivated a lot of times. They seemed more
personal,
self-satisfying motivated. So when we look at all that, I think if you can compare him to anyone, I think the obvious answer here is Richard Nixon. When you look at somebody who found themselves as president, wanted to do everything they could to stay president, and got caught with their attempts to sabotage the other side. The Watergate scandal sounds like something that would have come out of House of Cards, except it probably would not have been caught by Frank Underwood and his people. Doug Stamper would not have got caught in that act. So in that case, maybe he's better than Richard Nixon. But you could argue that Richard Nixon would have got away from it if there wasn't a certain individual staying at the Watergate Hotel that night. Bennett, who was the one that ratted out the Watergate scandal?
Okay, how about this time? It's Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump. And if Forrest Gump had not been retired to Greenbow, Alabama with Little Forrest by the time Frank Underwood was president, maybe Forrest Gump would have caught him in some of these things. So I think the only obvious comparison there would have to be Tricky Dick.
That was who I was going to go with as well. So you hit it right on the head.
The whole Watergate scandal could have been avoided if they wouldn't have used such bright flashlights.
That's it.
Because those lights was keeping Forrest awake. So he called it in.
That's right. Bennett, what actual president that we've had can you compare Whitmore to?
I'm kind of, not really, but I'm kind of cheating a little bit on this. I could not narrow it down to just one. So I picked three that I felt he shared some similarities with. Of course, we got to keep in mind this is a fictional president, not to be compared to these actual presidents, but in the sense of the question, these are the three I came up with. First, Abraham Lincoln, obviously because of both of their skills as a public speaker. Abraham Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address, and right before Whitmore goes, hop in the little fighter jet and whoop some tail, he delivers. I'm not going to do the whole speech for time constraint, but you can go look it up. Yeah, I don't have enough time to do it, but you know it. We all know it. Then second too, with Lincoln was how Lincoln wanted to unify the people. And Whitmore kind of talks a little bit too in his speech about that. He said we need to put aside our petty differences and unite as one, to fight this evil force. So I kind of saw some similarities there. Second would be with Teddy Roosevelt for a couple of things. First, Mr. Roosevelt, his involvement with the Rough Riders, being out there full force, let's go out there and whoop some tail. That kind of reminded me of Thomas Whitmore in that sense. And number two, with President Roosevelt, he was also a widow. His wife died 2 days after giving birth to their only child. So there was kind of some similarities there between Roosevelt being a widow and Whitmore being a widow. And finally, real quick, number three is FDR. Couple reasons there too. Number one is Pearl Harbor. Being attacked on Pearl Harbor, was unexpected. Even though tensions were high, it's kind of the same way with this. Tensions were high, but still, everything getting blown up was kind of a shock and unexpected. And then after that, the immediate call to war. The decisiveness. We're doing this. That's kind of how Thomas Whitmore too. He's like, okay, we're going to war. Real decisive. So those three: Lincoln, Roosevelt, and FDR is who I thought he looked a lot of similarities they shared there.
Good choices, Bennett. Good choices. I don't have any questions for y'all. So we're going to go straight into closing arguments, and we're going to start off with Bennett. Bennett,
Yeah.
why is it Thomas J. Whitmore?
I mean, as far as fictional presidents go, Thomas J. Whitmore makes a strong case to be the greatest to ever do it. You know, we talk about first, he was an American hero. You know, he served in the military. He was in the Air Force. He was as a pilot, Gulf War. Then he goes to pursue a career that lands him all the way into the White House. You know, sure, he wasn't perfect. He had his failures just like every other president that we've ever had. But, you know, he still overcomes these things, overcomes these failures. What I think really makes him stand out above the rest is when we were faced with this threat of global destruction by alien life form, like I said, the type of which that we've never really seen before. He didn't back down. He didn't, you know, tuck tail and run. He delivered, you know, that great speech like I've pounded into your brain the whole time. And he literally, not just figuratively or verbally led the attack. He literally leads the attack on the enemy by jumping into a fighter jet to assist saving not only America, but the human race. Pretty incredible. I don't know
about all these
what else you would be looking
someone
for
has.
in a fictional president.
Under attack
when
by
fear
aliens,
or adversity or anything like that is going to threaten our great nation, no doubt I want Thomas J. Whitmore to be the type of president to run our country.
I still would prefer to have the murder hornets first, but we won't go back to that right now.
Charisma, leadership,
but if you want to talk about
patriotism,
believability, you want to talk about someone that could actually things that could actually happen in today's environment. No fictional president has ever embodied that more than Francis J. Underwood. Was he a good guy?
Francis J. Underwood.
Did he do terrible things to get to where he wanted to be? Yes. But he did what he had to do for what he thought was best. Now, what he think was best benefit him over a country or constituents? Absolutely. But he still did what he wanted to, what he had to do to achieve his goals. He's known for breaking the fourth wall and talking directly to the viewer. And he's had a lot of quotes in that really describe who he is. But I think the one that says the road to power is paved with hypocrisy and casualties, never regret. That embodies who Francis Underwood was above all else. And I do say it in the past tense, even though it is a fictional character, because these stupid people killed him off before the last season and wanted us to believe that he was poisoned by Doug Stamper, which I know and you know and everybody that watches shows knows would never happen, because Doug Stamper was the most loyal human being to ever grace the face of the earth. But Frank Underwood is the most likely, the most believable, and really lived up to another one of his quotes. If you don't like how the table is set, turn over the table. And that's exactly what he did. That's how he went from a state senator at the age of 25 to the president of the United States without a single vote cast for him. That's why Francis J. Underwood is the greatest fictional president of all time. Because Claire Underwood would have never been vice president if it wasn't for Frank Underwood. She would have been out cohorting with photographers like she was known to do. You can say that,
It's
but
tough, guys.
everything
I told
she
you from the
did,
get-go, this is going to be
she
tough.
became president.
Better hero.
Without a
I think
vote cast
we
for
all
her
three
either.
can agree.
But guess what?
It's Whitmore.
She's not in
Better
that VP role if it's not for him.
Person
She's not
you want
involved
your
in
child
politics
to
at all
aspire to,
if it's not
Whitmore.
for him.
Some people might say Francis Underwood, but most people are going to say Whitmore.
Everything she got
this is
by
tough.
hook or by crook was
I
because of him.
What do you say to the people that say, Frank Underwood wasn't even the more cunning and best politician in his own family? What do you say that Claire Underwood actually won with his death? Well, let's say that he didn't die. He has to resign. She becomes president. So what do you have to say to those people that said Claire Underwood's even better than Frank? He's not even the best Underwood. Mostly back. The way I look at this is this. I love Whitmore. But those asides from Frank Underwood, the quotes that you get from him,
the folks of Gaffney,
I saw a thing
appreciate
earlier
your vote of confidence
that talked about House of Cards and how everything is portrayed in the show. And one of the writers, I believe it's for The Atlantic, said that
I didn't convince you.
House of Cards
Frank Underwood
just grazes
and in this
the surface of what it really
my
is
shirt
like.
Says 2016.
That it does. It's not.
But I'm going to say 2024.
Not even close. Like you think of it, portrays it correctly and how
because
vile it is, but
it's
the surface, and it gets even deeper than that.
So all right, guys and gals, we do appreciate you joining us for episode 40.
Better hero president would be back next week, but a more realistic,
with a fascinating topic that we're not 100% sure what it is yet. We have a rough idea, but I'm sure it'll be something good.
That's my boy, though.
I will say it's more than likely going to be sports related for the next 2 weeks.
So I'll remember that
like that. Make sure you're here. For those of you that don't like
I'll get
that,
Will Smith. Will Smith
tune in anyway.
He's the real hero in that movie.
Don't come calling Whitmore.
We'll get back to episodes you like. We still need you to support us on topics you don't care about. But either way, gentlemen, any parting words?
So, right, you have convinced me and the people of this country that Frank.
Fair enough.
That's right.
Oh man! All right, guys. What? Yep.
Peace.
Oh man! All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week. We hope you will too. And until then, for Mr. Bennett, for Mr. Ron,
in order to get from a no to a yes, you've got to have a maybe in between. Great quote.
Here we go. I got one thing. This episode is going to be one of my favorites. And I'll tell you why. Because when I was preparing my argument, I said, I'm not going to do any kind of Forrest Gump related quote. I'm not going to relate anything to Forrest Gump. This is going to be a first. And then Rutt comes through with 2, we are in good partnership. So for that sole reason alone, I thought we were going to be without Forrest, and then Rut saves the day. So this was an unexpected.
Love it. Love it.